it out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 537th edition of Energy Week with George Harvey and the amazing Tom Fennell, who is not with us today. He's not only not in the studio, he's apparently not home. He needed to go shopping, I think. That's what I heard anyway. And he hasn't made it back, so we're going to do the show without him, which is too bad because I like doing the show with Tom. Okay, this is the material that I'm going to be talking about today is news on energy and climate change from the 17th of August until the 24th of August. It can be found, these particular news items can be found at my blog. I will announce the dates if I remember to. So you can go to the blog, click on the calendar and find them. But there's also a file that you can download with the live links lower on the page that you're looking at, if you're looking at it over a computer. And there is a website that you can go to, also lower on the page, which has just the news items that we are dealing with. So we're going to start on Thursday, August 17th, with a piece called Mainstream Ocean Winds, that is Mainstream and Ocean Winds, they are two companies, partner on second Scots floater. This is from Renews. Mainstream Renewable Power and Ocean Winds partnered to develop a site east of Shetland, bringing the total capacity of the Arvin offshore wind farm to 2,300 megawatts, 2.3 gigawatts. The partnership is to develop one Arvin site with a capacity of 1,800 megawatts. I see that I haven't put that up for viewers. Ocean Winds is developing the other site alone, so that other site is 500 megawatts. This is a picture of an Ocean Winds site with it's a picture of 3 wind turbines at an Ocean Wind site. And these wind turbines are floating. The water is too deep to put in masts that stand on the bottom of the ocean, so they float. And there are several different ways of doing that. This particular one uses 3 large compartments per turbine. This is a relatively new form of offshore wind, which is being developed. And the development of this means that the areas of the ocean that can be developed are not limited to those that are near the coast. So, and they, in some places like off Maine and off California, Oregon, Washington State and so forth, probably off Hawaii too. The ocean, the floor of the ocean goes down so steeply that it's not possible to do ordinary masted wind turbines there either. So we will go on. Our next story, that story by the way was from Renews. Our next story is from BBC. And the picture is a picture of firefighters in the Northwest Territory, and of course it's from the government of the Northwest Territory. The title is Race to Evacuate City as Blaze Approaches. One of the largest cities in Canada's far north is being evacuated amid warnings that a wildfire could reach it by the weekend. This is, of course, a week ago. The 20,000 residents of Yellowknife, the capital of Northwest Territories, have until noon Friday to leave. Scientists say climate change increases the risk of wildfires. Well, it does increase the risk of wildfires, and there have been wildfires all over, which have been unusually bad for reasons that include unusually hot weather, as we will see very soon, and wildfires in other places. The big one of the week is the Lahaina wildfire, which is huge. But Yellowknife is the capital of the Northwest Territories, and it had to evacuate the capital of the Northwest Territories. I don't know what part of the population lives there, but the Northwest Territories are huge, but they have a very low population compared to the provinces in Canada. And honestly, unfortunately, I can't tell you what happened to Yellowknife, except that I can tell you that it didn't entirely burn down. So with that, I will go on. Here we have a picture of Ute solar workers. And there we go. This is from Grid Alternatives Tribal Program. And the article is from Clean Technica. U.S. energy jobs have increased in nearly every county. That's the title. The Department of Energy released county-level data on energy employment across the country. The data show that energy jobs grew in nearly every county in the United States last year, 2022. The release comes on the first anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act, which has already spurred $110 billion worth of energy, clean energy investments. Now, what's happened here is that the Inflation Reduction Act is, which by the way, as I recall, was a bipartisan act. That act put a lot of money and a lot of incentives into building renewable energy and clean tech. And the result of that is that a lot of people were hired. It's interesting to me that the employment opportunities that were created by this were uniform. I shouldn't say they were uniform because they really weren't. They happened all across the country in most, nearly every county. They weren't uniform because they hired people disproportionately in so-called red states, Texas, Oklahoma, Georgia, South Carolina, places like that. And I haven't heard anybody complain about that, but it is true. The red states, and I think it was because they were, from an environmental point of view, relatively backward. They had not made their own investments much, but the investments were in those states primarily. We are up to Friday, August 18th. We have a picture of a wildfire, and that is, every time I look at that, I think of Dante's Inferno. This is from the BBC, and it has more to do with wildfires in Canada. The title is How Canada's Wildfires Are Warming the Stratosphere. Research has shown that wildfires' likelihood and intensity, the likelihood and intensity of wildfires, have already increased due to human-caused global warming. There is still a lot we don't understand about these powerful phenomena, however. Not the least is the ability of wildfires to alter and disrupt climate systems long after they die out. That is to say, I'm going to put that up so people can really see it. The wildfires don't last terribly long. They're usually out in days or weeks, at the longest a season. There are occasionally wildfires that literally go on for months, but they're usually out by the time snow has been falling very long. But the effects of those wildfires, which include particulate matter in the air, they include carbon dioxide in the air. There's a lot going on there, and those effects outlast the wildfires by years. Carbon dioxide is going to be in the atmosphere with a half-life. I forget how many years is the half-life, but it's going to be in the atmosphere for decades, some of it. So this is just more information about that. Our next item is from CNN. And I'm going to put this up. The picture there, I just gave it the title that I gave it, Rich. The picture is by Charles C. Collingwood. The title of the article is America's richest 10% are responsible for 40% of its planet heating pollution. The synopsis says America's wealthiest people are also some of the world's biggest polluters, not only because of their massive homes and private jets, but because of the fossil fuels generated by the companies they invest their money in. This is according to a study published in the journal PLOS Climate. So this particular fellow is, I don't know that he's actually rich. He may be just a model posing as somebody who's rich. But the idea that I get looking at him is that he's very bored. And because he's so bored, he has decided that he wants to have a challenge. And the challenge in this case might be to see what life is like with his lungs destroyed. Too bad. Okay, our next item is from CNN. This picture is a picture of a venomous snake, and people who are viewing this show are very unlikely to come across one of this particular species. There have been, around Brattleboro, there have been in the past rattlesnakes, but I have not heard of one showing up in many years. I used to know a man who lived in Winchester, New Hampshire, who was born, I believe, in 1882. And he told me when he was young, he had heard that the train track running through Winchester going up to Keene, when it was being put in, which, as I recall, was in the 1840s. There was a man who was bitten by a rattlesnake working on that. And by the way, Mount Wentasticate used to be called Rattlesnake Mountain, for whatever that is worth. The title of this article is Snake Season Starts Early as Unusually High Temperatures Hit Australia. Snakes are active in warm weather, and Australia's east coast experiences one of the warmest winters on record. Snake season appears to have started early. The Australian Reptile Park has issued an urgent warning for people who have to be on the lookout for venomous snakes. The issue here is that because their winter is warmer than usual, the snakes are out. They can operate in the winter weather when that weather is sufficiently warm, and they're out looking for a meal. They're out looking for a mate, and they're just looking around. And it happens that Australia has two things. In the United States, we don't have many poisonous snakes. I have, in my life, only come across one, which was a rattlesnake I came across in Connecticut. I went to school at a school that had one of the biggest rattlesnake sites in the Appalachians, right on its, well, it was partly on the campus. And I did come across a rattlesnake when I was hiking down there. As I said, rattlesnakes live around here, but you know, they're not terribly common. I think for practical purposes they don't. But Australia has really poisonous snakes, and a lot of them. It also has a lot of really poisonous spiders. And by really poisonous, I'm not talking about an ordinary black widow, which will just make your ankle swell to the size of a football. I'm talking about spiders that will kill you relatively quickly. So I'm grateful that I live in a place that doesn't have that kind of wildlife going on. We are up to Saturday, August 19th, and we have a picture here of olive trees in a grove. This article is from CNN. It's a good thing to bear in mind, because if you buy olive oil, and most people I know do, or if you buy olives, and many people do that too, you might want to know about this. Olive oil is in trouble. This is the title. Olive oil is in trouble as extreme heat and drought push the industry into crisis. There is a crisis brewing in the olive oil industry. The scorching temperatures that swept southern Europe this summer claimed lives and led to intense wildfires. But they're also very bad news for olive trees. The olive industry experts are warning of potential shortages. And what they are warning of is shortages of both oil and the olives themselves, and naturally anything that is made of olives, like tapenade, for example, is something that is made from olives and capers very often. Always capers, usually olives. But it's capers and something else. But you know, the price of olive oil has gone up, and it will probably continue to go up, and you can blame it on the climate crisis. Okay, we have an article from the BBC here, and a picture of Southern California. You can see the outline of California there, and bits of Nevada, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and all of Arizona, along with large bits of Mexico. This is a picture of Hurricane Hillary, spelled with one L. The article is from the BBC. The title is Hurricane Hillary Sparks Rare Storm Watch for California. And we will talk more about this because the storm hit California and made a mess out of a lot of places. A Category 4 storm called Hillary is predicted to make first landfall in Baja California on Saturday morning, which is basically what happened. Forecasters say it will move towards Southern California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah as a tropical storm. It would be the first tropical storm to hit California in over 80 years. It did not hit California as a Category 4 or even 1 hurricane. It hit as a very much reduced tropical storm, but it dumped incredible amounts of water out in the desert. And you don't need much water in the desert to cause a lot of trouble. Okay, this is a picture of solar panels. And this article is from CNN. The title is, Feds determine 5 Chinese solar panel companies have been skirting U.S. tariffs. After an investigation lasting over a year, officials concluded that 5 Chinese solar PV makers were skirting U.S. tariff laws by routing their operations through 4 other Southeast Asian countries. Higher tariffs will be delayed until 2024, so installers can find other sources. The problem that we have here is that because of the policies of the U.S. government, at various times, very little support was given to solar manufacturers, solar cell, solar panel manufacturers in the past in the United States. And they were basically put out of business, the ones that did exist, of which there were very few. Not all put out of business, but some of them were put out of business because the Chinese were subsidizing their own solar cell makers to the point that they could be sold in the United States. The solar cells could be sold in the United States at prices considerably lower than the prices of American solar cells. And that started the trade war that Donald Trump announced. But the problem is that the Chinese got around the trade war by, instead of shipping the panels to the United States, by shipping them to places like Vietnam and I think Myanmar. I forget what other countries, Cambodia possibly, I don't know. But they were being shipped there and then relabeled as solar panels that were made in those countries and then shipped to the United States. And part of the problem with trying to regulate this is the people who install solar panels have got to have solar panels to install. And they don't want to pay extra for solar panels just because they were not made in China. But China had 90% of the solar panel manufacturing of the world. And at least that's my recollection of a very approximate figure. So we've had to figure out a way to deal with that, and building new solar panel manufacturing plants in the United States was something that the federal government has worked on. But building those factories and getting them online is going to take a little time. Okay, we have another picture of Hillary here, and I honestly can't tell you what's going on here, or at least I can't tell you why the colors are what they are. If you look very closely at this picture, you can see that up near the top is the border between Arizona and Mexico. To the right of the center of the storm, you can see the coast of Mexico. You can even see the east coast of Mexico to the right of that. This is on a pretty big scale. Okay, it's from Clean Technica. The title is Tropical Storms Like Hillary Could Significantly Change Southern California's Coast. Okay, experts say that over a year's worth of rain could fall within a couple of days in some areas of Southern California this weekend. And I will tell you, the reports that came out said that that did indeed happen. There were a couple of places where 2 years worth of rain fell in 36 hours. Southern California has not had a tropical storm since 1939. That was a long time ago, before I was born. But if more are coming, they could alter the coast. And of course, what that means is the beaches could be not where they are. They could be very different. And the whole coast of Southern California could have, different characteristics in different places. Doesn't mean that it's better or worse. It just means that it's not stable. Makes it kind of hard to plan going surfing and things like that unless you know what changes there have been. And so, that is not a good thing. Our next story is from Clean Technica. We have a picture of agrivoltaics going on. A person is working in a field on vegetables, row vegetables in the field, and the field is partly shaded by solar panels. Agrivoltaics is making friends across partisan lines thanks to farmers. I didn't use the word partisan. That was whoever the editor was at Clean Technica that decided to write this. I think they mean party. U.S. farmers are warming up to agrivoltaics, which co-locate solar arrays with grazing fields, row crops, pollinator habitats, and other forms of agricultural activity. The rise of this dual-use movement comes at a good time for both farmers and solar advocates. There's a couple of comments that I've got here, one of which was I did research on specific makes and models of solar panels, and the ones that I looked at did not have in them chemicals like cadmium or arsenic, things of that nature. Putting crops under the solar panels that I saw, contents broken down, would, in my opinion, not be unsafe. I don't see how they could leach poisonous materials into the soil because they didn't have any poisonous materials in them to begin with. The ones that have the poisonous materials, I have seen it said that they're usually used in places where the temperatures during the daytime often get above 100 degrees because they deliver energy more efficiently at high temperatures than the other panels. The other thing that I would want to say is that, contrary to what some people think, growing crops in a condition like this can improve the yield. And in fact, the University of Arizona and the Fraunhofer Institute have both done extensive tests on this. And the Fraunhofer Institute found that in one of its tests, two fields side by side, identical in every way, except one had solar panels and one did not, both growing tomatoes. The one with the solar panels produced more than 100% more. That is to say, it produced over 200% of what the one without solar panels did. Now, the solar panels are an alternate form of income for the farmers. So this could be a very big win and very safe for agriculture. And another thing is those solar panels also provide a certain level of protection for the crops below them. For example, although it's very imperfect protection, it would protect some of the crop from hail. Okay, our next item. What have we done here? Our next item is from Eurasia Review, and we have a picture of Chicago here. And this says, U.S. can cut building emissions by up to 91%, saving $100 billion per year in energy-related costs. And by the way, this is on Saturday, August 20th, as were the preceding two articles. In a paper published in the journal One Earth, a team of researchers found that the United States can achieve its climate goals, decrease building emissions by 91% from their 2005 peak, and save over $100 billion each year on energy costs. And of course, this is just another one of those studies that finds that we can do a lot better than we are and save a lot of money in the process. I don't think there's much need to go any further than that into it. The next article is from BBC, and it has a picture of Death Valley. The title is Floods Hit Death Valley as Storm Hilary Peaks in California. Hilary is the first tropical storm to hit California in 84 years. It has brought record rains, flooding Los Angeles and desert areas like Palm Springs and Death Valley. Experts say recent abnormal weather events hitting the U.S. and other countries are influenced by human-caused climate change. Now, I want to point out that area that we're looking at was probably flooded, but that doesn't mean it was flooded deeply. We don't know how much it was flooded. My bet is that it was flooded about ankle deep or something like that for that person who's out there. But it would have looked like a lake. And it's Death Valley. So what do you say? I noticed that in the news today, all of the people in the debate yesterday for the, who were the 8 Republicans running for nomination to be president of the United States, all of them said they don't believe that, indicated by not raising their hand when the question was raised, who here believes in climate change? None of them raised their hand. None of them said that they believed in it. Some of them were very willing to attack Donald Trump, saying that he was should not be reelected. But none of them was willing to say that they thought climate change was not happening. I will point out that there's a lot of money going into their campaigns from fossil fuels industry, and they don't want to antagonize the fossil fuels industry. Okay, our next picture is a picture of what are called föhn clouds. The word föhn means a hair dryer, but in Germany it can also mean a kind of weather phenomenon, and the clouds are associated with that. This is from the BBC. The weird wind that can supercharge heat waves and wildfires. In German, Föhn means hair dryer, but it can also mean a weird hot wind. The Föhn effect is a hot, dry wind that sweeps down a mountainside, baking everything in its path. It can take place anywhere on Earth, and it can cause local temperatures to rise by over 28 degrees Celsius, centigrade, I used to call it. That is a rise of 50 degrees Fahrenheit in 1 hour. So if it's 20 degrees out, one of these things can raise the temperature to 70 in 1 hour. And there have been instances of large windows breaking because of the rapid change in temperature. Now, what is happening here is that the clouds are produced by rapid they are produced rapidly by condensation of water in the air. When the condensation happens, the air temperatures rise rapidly. Now, why the clouds are above the hot air, I don't know. This is an inversion. I don't understand why that happens. But the hot air, which has had the water vapor removed from it, goes racing down those hillsides, and it can cause a lot of mischief. And it is something that is a problem for climate change because it can make things a lot worse. Okay, our next picture is a picture of a wildfire in Canada. Let me get this up. The articles from the BBC were back to the Northwest Territories and its record temperatures. The title is Canada's Northwest Territories set a record for its hottest temperature. With a Sunday temperature of 37.4 degrees Celsius, which is 99.3 degrees Fahrenheit, Fort Good Hope in the Northwest Territories saw, quote, the hottest temperature recorded that far north in Canada, end quote. According to Environment Canada meteorologist Jessie Wagger. She added that new records smashed the previous ones often by several degrees. And that's kind of a problem, and this picture is a picture of the result. You have forests that are extremely susceptible to wildfires, which can be started by all kinds of things, including, just lightning is a good example. Lightning, by the way, in weird weather can be weird. I've seen lightning that was absolutely incredible. It was so weird. Lightning bolts 60 feet long, but they hit an ash tree and the ash tree explodes. Things like that happen, and when you've got a heat wave going on, the possibility of natural fire just breaking out is far higher than it would be otherwise. Okay, we're up to Tuesday, August 22nd, and we have a picture that I'm really interested in. This is the kind of internals of the Form Energy Iron Air battery. And the article comes from PV Magazine USA. The title is Multi-Day Energy Storage Increases Grid Capacity by a Factor of 10. I'm going to have to explain that as I understand it. Form Energy announced that it has been awarded a $12 million grant from NYSERDA, which is an agency in New York State for renewable energy, for a 10 megawatt, 1,000 megawatt hour pilot battery project in New York State by 2026. This will be Form Energy's first grid-scale project in New York. But similar projects are already going up in Colorado and Minnesota. Now, the thing that is interesting about this is that it is okay, let me back off on that. Several years ago, 5 years ago, I think it might have been 6, Elon Musk, noticing that there was a severe problem in South Australia because of a weather event. The problem had the grid down for days, announced that he would build a battery, a 100 megawatt battery in South Australia, and if he didn't get it up and running within 100 days of the time the contract was signed, South Australia would get it for free. And the people in South Australia immediately started looking into this, and they did a auction to see who would bid for such a battery at the lowest price. And of course, Elon Musk won the battery installation. He put the battery in, and the battery was operating on the 98th day, well enough that it was able to save South Australia a lot of money. And it saved a huge amount of money. Now, the reason I bring that up is because that was the biggest battery in the world at that time. It was 100 megawatts. Now, this Form Energy battery is going to be 10 megawatts, so it's only 10% as big. But the Hornsdale Power Reserve battery that was put up was 129 megawatt hours. That means that if you could run it at 100% until it had to shut down, you would only run it for 1.29 hours. Now, it was not possible to do that because the battery would only run for something like 20 minutes before it had to be drastically reduced in its output. Nevertheless, 129 megawatt hours for that, the biggest battery in the world. Now we have a battery with power at 10 megawatts. But it'll run for 1,000 megawatt hours, which means that if you're running it at full output, which by the way you can, it will run without any charge at all for 100 hours. And This is happening very, very, very cheaply. And the reason why it's cheap is because there's no lithium, there's no cobalt, there's no nickel, there's none of that stuff. It isn't a flow battery that uses vanadium vanadium. It uses iron. It's an iron air battery. If the iron is rusting, the battery gives off electricity. If the battery is being charged, the rust is being converted back to iron. That's how it works. It's really a very fascinating thing. And the projection is that these batteries will be able to charge and discharge at a cost that is so low that the cost of storing solar power will be approximately 0.5 cents per kilowatt hour, which means that if you can generate solar power at 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour, you can store it in these things for 0.5 cents. That means that you've got the ability to deliver electricity at 3 cents per kilowatt hour. We're paying something on the order of 20 cents per kilowatt hour in Vermont. And even in places with low-cost electricity, it's more like 10 cents per kilowatt hour. NextEra Energy has last October talked about what they call near-firm solar and near-firm wind. And by near-firm, what they mean is that it is as reliable as nuclear for producing electricity for the market on demand for at peak demand times. And that's pretty interesting. And they say that using solar in batteries or wind in batteries, that electricity will cost less than 4 cents per kilowatt hour. Coal isn't even in the picture. Old natural gas and nuclear plants will be competed with by new solar and batteries. And as for nuclear, they say small modular reactors, they don't expect will produce electricity any cheaper than 10.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So if you're going to have the choice, would you pay extra for nuclear, 10.5 cents, or would you pay less for solar with batteries if it's just as good? And I would argue that if you go through the list of all of the things, you would have to conclude that solar with batteries is probably better in almost every respect than nuclear. Because it isn't inflexible, which nuclear is. So, anyway, let's go on. That article was from PV Magazine USA. Our next article is from Clean Technica, and this is kind of special. This is a greenhouse with clear view windows. Let me read the title and the synopsis for you. Peer-reviewed research confirms clear view solar window benefits. That's the title. Clear view, and by the way, the caption on that picture has Clearview spelled wrong. View is V-U-E. Clearview, based in Perth, Australia, makes PV solar windows. In a 2-year study of Clearview windows installed in the roof and vertical walls of greenhouse at Murdoch University, researchers found that Clearview's clear solar glazing produces consistent energy generation. What you're seeing here is the inside of a greenhouse, and the windows are all solar panels. You just don't see the solar panels because you can look through them. And that is a way to grow your vegetables. Okay, we have another picture of damage in Southern California. This is a picture that is a prediction that happened to come roughly true of flooding in Southern California and other states. This is from the BBC. Storm Hillary, flooding cuts off Palm Springs. Palm Springs was cut off by flooding. What do you think of that? Hillary, the first tropical storm to hit Southern California in 84 years, cut off the desert city of Palm Springs after dumping a year's worth of rain. Flooding closed major roads in and out of Palm Springs after 3.18 inches of rain fell. Death Valley National Park got a full year's rain in one day. And that's kind of a shocking event. So we're up to Wednesday, August 23rd, and we have a graph here. Let me put this graph up. We have a graph of planned additions and retirements in the U.S. utility scale electric capacity, and this is from Clean Technica. The title is 86% of new U.S. electric utility generation capacity coming from non-fossil fuels in 2023. Well, yeah. What that means is that 4% of it is coming from nuclear because a new nuclear reactor has come online. I think two during 2023, 2 reactors. The fossil fuels are natural gas. Let me read the synopsis. Efforts to decarbonize the U.S. grid are evident in planning additions and retirements of utility-scale generating capacity. For 2023, new capacity will be primarily from solar, 52%, and wind, 13%, while batteries for stored energy will provide 17%. So all 3 of those are pretty big. Wind and natural gas are basically at the same level. One thing to notice here is that on the right side of this, you've got retirements. The retirements are coming from coal, big retirements from coal with no new coal plants going online in the United States. Not a surprise. I don't think we've had any for 8 or 10 years. Big retirements in natural gas, 36% of all retirements will be natural gas. 2% of petroleum, which means that diesel is being cut out. One thing I want to point out about this, though, is that these 2 graphs are pie charts, and the pies are equal sized, but they are not actually equal sized when it comes to the amount of capacity they represent. The additions are 56.1 gigawatts. The retirements are 14.5 gigawatts. And really, I would have been much happier with this combination of graphs if the one on the right were had about half of the diameter that it has, because that would make it closer to the actual value relative to the graph on the left. And if that happened, it would be much clearer that the amount of natural gas that is being retired is in fact a little bit bigger than the amount of the amount that's being added is a little bit bigger than the amount that's being retired, because that wedge of natural gas on the right would be much, much smaller. 36% of 14.5 gigawatts turns out to be a little bit less than 14% of 56.1 gigawatts. Nevertheless, the difference is about 2 gigawatts, or a little over 2 gigawatts, and that means that the actual change, the growth, if you will, for the various types of energy, natural gas represents only about 2% of the growth. If you combine those graphs, which by the way would not be easy, because it would be not easy to have a graph in a pie chart that shows a declining value. You'd have to do it with bar charts or something like that. Efforts, and as I say, I read the title, I'll read it again. 86% of new electric utility generation capacity coming from fossil fuels in 2023. Efforts to decarbonize the United States power grid are evident in planned additions and retired utility-scale generation. For 2023, new capacity will be primarily from solar, 52%. I think I read this. Wind, 13%, while batteries will provide 17%. I did read it, and I'm sorry I read it again. Okay, we are up to a picture of Dulles International Airport that is in the Virginia Mercury. Dulles International Airport is one of two big airports for Washington, D.C., but Dulles is considerably farther from Washington than the Reagan Airport is, which is in Crystal City, Virginia, and it's just across the river. Okay, this is, as I said, from the Virginia Mercury. Dominion and Dulles break ground on nation's largest renewable energy project at an airport. Okay, Dominion Energy and Virginia officials have broken ground at Dulles International Airport for a solar, battery, and EV project they said will be the largest such project at an airport. It will have 100 megawatts of solar capacity. That's a big. And a 50 megawatt battery. This business of combining solar power and batteries is getting to be more and more common at solar projects. It's also getting to be common to combine wind power and batteries. This is an interesting thing because by doing that, you can actually save money. Years ago, I was talking to a person who was talking about a huge solar project that was, as I recall, going to be installed in Arabia. And he said that they were installing batteries there to save money. And this was not all that many years ago, but it was about the same time as the Horndale Power Reserve. And I questioned the business of spending money on a battery. You know, what is the economy of a battery out in the desert? Why would you spend a lot of money on a battery like that? And he said, the electric line providing power to whatever city this was going to be hooked up with was well over 100 miles long. Now, if the solar project was going to provide electricity during the day only, so that all of the electricity that it generated had to go out during the day to that city 100 and some odd miles away, it would require a huge transmission line. But if the solar project was limited in what it could produce to, say, 100 megawatts, and whatever was over that was used to charge the batteries, then you'd only need 100 megawatts worth of cable instead of 300 or whatever it was. And it turned out that it was cheaper to put in the battery than it was to provide for the transmission line at a larger size. So that's something to bear in mind. It speaks, I think, rather powerfully to the idea of having distributed power local to wherever the power is used, with batteries local to wherever the power is used, rather than, for example, piping electricity to Brattleboro from Michigan, where you could put up wind turbines. One thing to bear in mind for a thing like that is that wind turbines occasionally kill birds. On a net basis, they save the lives of birds. But transmission lines kill a lot of birds because the birds fly into the lines, because the lines are at a lower height than the wind turbines' blades are. I could go into that someday. I was surprised by the research that supported that. Okay, we are up to our last item, which is from Clean Technica. And we have a graph of solar generation renewable energy generation in California. This graph is not capacity. It's not, this is not the total capacity. This is the actual generation. You'll notice that the scale on the left is in total gigawatt hours, and it's in thousands of gigawatt hours, which means terawatt hours. They use a lot of power in California, but it's because they have a lot of people, I think. You'll notice, I think, one of the things that struck me about this is that the total number of gigawatt hours that were produced by geothermal, small hydro, and biomass combined seems to be relatively flat. And I'm not sure why. It looks to me like they're probably taking what they can from places in order to juggle things so that they work well. The title here is Solar Up 20 Times, Fossil Fuel Use Down in California. According to data from the California Energy Commission, the state made significant strides to meet goals to develop a resilient grid, attain 100% clean electricity, and meet its carbon neutrality objectives. In the last decade, solar generation grew from 2,609 gigawatt hours. And if you look to the left on this, you'll see that the solar, which is, I think they're talking about utility scale solar when they give that figure. If you look, you'll see that solar is really small in 2012, 2013, and then in 2014, it more than doubles. And from that point on, it's just growing. In the last decade, solar grew from 2,609 to an astounding 48,950 gigawatt hours. That's impressive growth. That's really big growth. And it tells us that, well, for one thing, solar panels can be put in extremely rapidly. And when they're put in with batteries, as we've been talking about, they can wind up with power supplies that are pretty reliable. Next Era Energy said that they can be as reliable as nuclear. Okay, that's basically it for the day, for the week. And I am going to tell you, have a significantly peachy week. Now, today I'm going to wave goodbye. Tom is going to say to himself, you all come back now, you hear? But I hope Tom is doing well. I haven't heard from him why he wasn't able to come, but I do know that he was out getting groceries earlier today. So I'm presuming that he's probably okay. And I hope you come back and visit us next week. We'll have more to talk about. Bye-bye.